Okay, welcome to those that have joined us here in council chambers as well as those that have joined us from home. This is a meeting of the Poquoson City Council for Monday, December 11th. And before we start, I'm going to apologize for Councilman Southall. I have sent him over to Wallops Island to represent the city at the range over there. They're talking over there about the future of Wallops Island, the potential incorporation of them in our support of them in their regional affairs. We did not want to miss that. I've talked about extensively about that and looking forward to what comes out of that particular meeting. Now, if we could all please rise, I'll lead you in the invocation and pledge of allegiance. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and for the many blessings as we enter this Christmas season. As we deliberate the issues before us, we ask for a portion of your wisdom that guide us through very difficult and upcoming decisions, both now and in the future. I ask tonight for a special blessing that be felt by those who are retiring from the city in 2017. I will make mention that we have several big losses to us. It's going to take us to wrap around those losses of personnel to make up for the loss of talent, of character, and of guidance from them. This year alone, we'll lose almost 200 years of experience within our city, and this council will have to come up with less and less information and make yet the same decisions. So we ask for your guidance. And we never want to avoid discussion with you, Lord, of the protection of our public safety employees. May you be with them throughout this holiday season. May you be with our military as they serve us in foreign lands. Be with them, protect their families as they protect all of us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're in special presentations section and the introduction of new employees. We're going to skip that as the new employees could not make it here this evening. And the next one is a report by you, Chief, from Chief Bowen, a special report on the goings-on, and we appreciate you coming here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Appreciate you allowing me to have a few moments of your time tonight to bring some information to your attention. Between November the 11th and November the 26th of this year, the police department took 11 burglary reports involving breaking and entering of garages and detached sheds in the city. In each of these incidents, the suspects committed larceny of tools, power tools, and lawn equipment. Detectives from our police department began an intensive investigation into these thefts and a search for the stolen property. This investigation led to the identification of a person of interest in those crimes. Detectives contacted the Newport News Police Department and began a joint investigation into the identified person of interest. This joint investigation led to the arrest of one suspect and the execution of one search warrant on November the 29th in Newport News. The suspect was initially charged with 5 felonies related to the burglaries in the city of Poquoson. As of this afternoon, detectives have requested 7 additional felony charges against this particular suspect. First, I want to congratulate Detective Lisa Turner and Detective John Foster for their outstanding work on these criminal cases. Second, I want to commend them for their tenacity and the professionalism they have demonstrated while pursuing leads and evidence during this investigation. Under the leadership of Sergeant James Moore, these detectives were the first to make an arrest in what was clearly a serial burglary case spanning several jurisdictions on the peninsula. Finally, I want to thank the manager and members of council. As council members, I'm sure you don't often get to see the results of your decisions so quickly or even get timely feedback on how your decisions affect those you serve. But during last year's budget process, I submitted a request for additional personnel and resources to enhance our investigative capabilities in order to alleviate the increasing workload on Detective Turner. You granted that request with an additional full-time position that allowed me the flexibility to move personnel, like Detective John Foster, and other resources to where they were most needed and when they were most needed. As a result, these recent burglary cases are the best example of how those additional resources, approved by you, were critical to our success during this investigation and continue to have a positive impact on our ability to pursue leads in other cases. So congratulations to each of you, because today you share in our success as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief, and that's great news. We really appreciate you bringing that to us this evening, and I'm sure that the homeowners will relax as well. And we appreciate as well the notification process that you went through on Code Red and keeping everybody informed. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next item is an audit presentation, and Tanya? Presentation.
Good
Introduction.
evening. In your package, y'all should have received our annual report. Tonight, we have the partner from Cherry Becker, Krista Edolph. She is going to go over some of the reports and findings. None I have to add. So I'd like to introduce her now. I'm going to let her take over, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Okay. Thank you, and welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, City Manager, and all members of council and the rest present tonight. I am pleased to be here to report the results of the June 30, 2017 audit. So we were engaged to audit the financial statements of the city, as well as its component units, the school board and the Economic Development Authority. So in conducting our audit, we did not only audit the financial statement, but we're also charged with auditing the city's compliance with certain laws and regulations, as outlined by the Auditor of Public Accounts of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are also tasked with auditing your compliance and internal controls related to the single audit, which is your federal grants that you receive. So we are charged in performing our audits to ultimately issue an audit opinion on the financial statements, your compliance with laws and regulations, and your compliance with federal grants. So you will see within that financial statement document, those financials are those of the city as well as yourself. We have 3 opinions within those financial statements that we issued as a result of our audit. So based on our audit, we did issue an unmodified opinion on all 3 of those reports, which is a clean audit opinion. So ultimately, that is what you would want as a result of an audit. So in conducting our audit, we primarily look at the material balances and transactions, those numbers that you see within the financial statements. In addition, we are required to gain an understanding of the internal control environment. So we do that via interviews, walkthroughs of transactions, and we make certain tests of transactions, ultimately to review the design of your internal controls, not to test the operating effectiveness of those controls. So we do not issue a separate opinion on the operating effectiveness of your controls. However, if any deficiencies in internal control were to come to our attention in the performance of our interviews, walkthroughs, or testing, we would be required to point those out to you. So I am pleased to tell you that there were no reportable deficiencies that we included as a result of our audit within the schedule of findings and question costs within the financial statements. Additionally, in our tests of laws and regulations, as well as single audit grant compliance, if any matters came to our attention where you were not in compliance, we'd also be required to report those to you. And I'm pleased to tell you that there were no matters of non-compliance reported in these financial statements. So as a result of our audit, there are a few additional areas I am required to tell you about. If there were any significant new accounting principles or standards that would impact the comparability of the last year's financials to the current year, we would be required to tell you about those, and there were none effective for fiscal year 17. So built into the financial statements, there are some significant estimates. So not every number is a hard and fast number like cash. So cash it is what it is. It's the amount you have in the bank, it's the amount you reconcile. Cash is cash. However, there are some items in the financial statements where there's certain assumptions and calculations that are used to come up with what those balances are, and any change in those assumptions might affect those numbers. So we do want to bring those to your attention. Your allowance for doubtful accounts on your taxes receivables, those are an estimate. They're based on management judgments and past collection rates around the city. Depreciation expense is an estimate because it's ultimately based on the useful lives of those assets that are acquired. And then lastly are any actuarially computed liabilities. So the biggest example is going to be your pension liability. That's based on significant assumptions, mortality tables that the actuaries use, and discounted to present value of what those long-term benefit payments are going to be. So again, significant estimates, they are subject to change, and they are reviewed annually for any changes in those assumptions. So throughout the course of the audit, if we propose any audit adjustments, we are required to bring those to your attention. We did note this year that in reporting the government-wide financial statements, we did propose one journal entry to bring on a capital lease. That was recorded in the current year, but not booked on the face of those financial statements. If we were to have any disagreements with management or difficulties performing the audit, we would be required to bring those to your attention, and I'm pleased to tell you that we did not have any disagreements or difficulties in conducting our audit. So at the conclusion of the audit, we do require management to represent to us that they gave us all of the information we needed to conduct our audit, that the financial statements are correctly misstated and correctly stated and in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So management did provide us with that letter in issuance of the financial statements. So lastly, we are required to be independent. That means we have no family relationships or other relationships that would cause us bias in giving you an opinion that possibly you didn't warrant. So I do want to bring to your attention a couple future financial statements that will have a significant impact on the city's financial statements. Next year, there is the other post-employment benefit plan standard that's coming out, and essentially what that'll do is bring the liability that you have for other post-employment benefits on the face of your financial statements, just like pension did 3 years ago. So that will be something new. And then the next one that'll be coming out really isn't effective until 2020. This is potentially a significant change, not only in the government world, but we're seeing this in the private world and in the international sector. So ultimately, we're moving to one reporting for leases. And essentially, all leases will be reported like a capital lease, where essentially it'll provide a grossing up effect on your statement of net position. So you will ultimately record the lease liability and an offsetting asset, which represents a right to use asset. So that's what's going to happen with leases going out in 2020. So with that, I would really like to thank Ms. O'Connell as well as Ms. Woodruff and their teams that did assist us in conducting the audit. It's very much appreciative. It makes the audit run so much more smoothly. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have about the audit.
Council, any questions? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you. Let me just say this, that we appreciate the audit. You know, I guess if I was home and I was talking about my taxes at home, I might have a different story, but auditing of public funds is such a vital role in what we do. And it's so important for our citizens to understand that you can trust what the city of Poquoson does with their funding, and your backup in making sure that we do. So thank you very much for your time in doing this, and for your findings, and for helping us to just be a better city. So thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda this evening is an audience for visitors. If you're here to speak about any of the public hearings, if you can refrain at this time, but I'll open the audience for visitors if there's somebody that wants to address another topic. Okay, seeing none, I'll close the audience for visitors and ask council for approval of the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of our regular session of November 13th, 2017.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. We approve the regular session minutes for November 13th of 2017. Questions, comments, or revisions? Seeing none, Judy, please.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Hucks.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Councilman Canella.
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Very good. And the work session of the same date?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the work session minutes of November 13th, 2017.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded that we approve those also. I don't think you'll have any questions, so Judy, please.
Councilman Canella.
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Hucks.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, next item on the agenda is our public hearing section. We have two items under here, but the first is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance by amending Section 1, Tax 17, to incorporate provisions for the keeping of bees.
Deanna, are you presenting? Please come forward.
Okay, so I'll go forward with presenting the language that we have for you today for amending the farm animal ordinance, Section 1-17 of the zoning ordinance regarding beekeeping. So just as some background, beekeeping is currently not included in our farm animal ordinance or in our zoning ordinance at all for that matter. At their last regular session on November 13th, City Council decided to add beekeeping regulation at their next regular session in December. They were presented with a sheet of language that is based on proposed regulations from a local beekeeper, Tom Powers. This language was presented to a number of city council members, planning commissioners, and city staff for their discussion. However, it was not included in any official versions of the farm animal ordinance that have been under discussion. So the language is basically the same as what was presented to you last meeting, and it consists of the following, starting with Section A. Farm animals may be kept in the city subject to obtaining a use permit and the following conditions. So in subsection 5, the following shall apply to beekeeping. Point A, in no case shall a hive be placed closer than 3 feet from a property line. Point B, a beekeeper who places hives less than 25 feet from a property line with the entrance facing said property line shall do so only if there is a barrier between the hive and the property line, or if the hive is elevated with its entrance no less than 6 feet above the ground. Barriers should be of sufficient density, length, and height to establish bee flyways 6 feet or higher above ground level at the property line, and may include dense vegetation, an accessory structure, or a privacy fence. Point C, beekeepers shall maintain a water source within 50 feet of a hive or less than 1/2 the distance to the nearest unnatural source of water which is not on their property, whichever is closest. Unnatural sources of water include swimming pools and pet or livestock watering receptacles. Point D, the Public Works Department shall maintain a list of contact information for beekeepers who wish to be notified of insect control measures performed by government entities which are harmful to bees. Listed beekeepers shall be notified at least 48 hours prior to aerial application of control measures. The Public Works Department shall exercise prudence near known hive locations when performing ground-based control measures. Point E, in cases where beehives are located more than 40 feet from a public right-of-way, enforcement of beekeeping regulations shall only be initiated based on complaints of an affected adjacent property owner. So that's the entirety of the language proposed. You will notice that Section A4 is reserved. That is reserved for any future changes to rooster and chicken keeping. As part of our updates to the farm animal ordinance, we would like to move the regulations for chickens to that section in our ordinance to improve the flow of the actual ordinance. Also, please note that in this current draft, beekeeping will require a farm animal permit. Permits do have an initial $15 application fee, and they are subject to an annual inspection, review, and renewal. And as the end of my presentation, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Okay. Any questions of Dannon or Randy, would you like to follow up on something?
Something, Dan, I mean, you're finished.
Okay. Any questions?
Just one question, Dan. When it refers to an annual renewal, there'll be no additional fee, is that correct?
That's correct.
And y'all are going to look at a farm animal definition,
Yes, we would be looking at that in your next meeting, which is in January.
Okay, I think just basic regulation writing 101 is you always define all the terms. I know that I've either written or reviewed probably hundreds of regs, and you got to have all the terms defined, so I think that's very important.
Right.
Okay.
All right. No other questions?
Dannon, would you load Mr. Powers' presentation and either assist him or so that he can walk through the few slides that he had prepared for us, please?
Sure.
Okay. If that's it for the staff presentation, I'll open the public hearing, and I know that Mr. Powers wants to speak. So, Mr. Powers, if you would come up, we've received your discussion slides, and the podium is yours.
Mr. Powers?
Mayor and council members, thank you for letting me talk tonight. I've been a beekeeper. Somewhere along the line it said I'm an expert bee. No, I've been beekeeping for about 6 years. I'm still learning. I have residential beekeeping. I prepared this talk for a zoning association meeting that was held at City Hall here back in July, and I pulled some slides out of it. This is a typical picture of a beekeeper in Poquoson, how they have their bees next to the house and near their property line. Why keep bees? Losses in pollinators due to disease, insecticides, and sudden colony collapse is an issue globally. Most residential beekeepers do so for environmental reasons. Not all hives make it through the winter to produce sufficient honey for harvest. Current loss statistics are you lose 30 to 40% of your hives every winter. There's a smaller amount of losses of hives during the summer and fall, so even if you come out of the winter and build up, you can lose a few hives over the summer. For this reason, many beekeepers will build up a number of hives over the spring and early summer. They'll build their hive numbers up. I think I had 6 this summer earlier, and right now I'm down to 4. So that you can deal with the losses. Except for losses due to a few specific diseases, you can reuse the woodware. So if somebody loses their bees, they can get grumpy and say, I'm not going to keep bees for a couple of years. 2 years later, they can go back, use the same woodware, and start keeping bees again. Domestic bees are not aggressive. They are bred to be docile. Fortunately, we don't live in Florida where you have Africanized bees. If you catch a swarm in Florida, you got to requeen right away just because you don't know where the bees came from. Beekeepers who find an aggressive hive will requeen the hive. They'll go in and find the queen and do away with her and put in a new queen to improve the genetics of the hive and get a more mild. Beekeepers don't like aggressive bees because they're really a pain to work around. So lawn care and operation machinery for your neighbors, that's an issue for some people have brought up. So long as you don't direct the spigot out of the lawnmower, the chute out of the lawnmower at the beehives, they're generally okay, with the exception of farm tractors. I've heard this from a number of different people, that if you take a big farm tractor and drive it down cutting the grass and it's vibrating the earth, it gets the bees grumpy if you get it too close. Activities as a function of distance from the hive. And this is what, I mean, the real thing I think about beekeeping regulation is how to be nice to your neighbors, how to be a reasonable person. And this is where it's important to understand these things. At any given time, there can be a cloud of bees out in front of the hive, about 4 feet in front of the hive, vertically and out in front. They generally don't go out more than a little ways out to the side. There is very little, if any, activity directly behind the hive. You walk up behind a hive, you can look over the side of it, and you're good and safe there. For hives placed on the ground, there will be quite a bit of coming and going activity in front of the hive. The bees leave at about a 20-degree angle, so by the time they get across this room, they'll be about 6 feet off the ground, 8 feet off the ground, and they ignore people pretty much. Hives placed on a stand starting a distance, the starting distance of the hive is where the bees start out and they continue to fly up when they leave the hive. My hives are about 10 feet off the ground and the bees just keep going up after they leave. No matter where the hives are placed, there will be more or less uniform amount of feeding activity for a few hundred yards. The most bees in my neighborhood are at Chuck Bryant's house across the street from my house, because he has flowers all over his front yard and a goldfish pond in his backyard that they like to go get water out of. But that's across the street. It's 100 yards away from my bees. The density of bees goes down, but bees will forage out to a mile or so. When I bought my bees, I had not seen a bee in my neighborhood. I'd seen 2 bees in my neighborhood in 18 years, 2 honeybees. And I bought hives, and now you see them on a regular basis. Generally speaking, in all these cases, the bees do not care about the presence of people and pets so long as the people and pets ignore the bees. And of course, if you swat a bee or try to catch it, you're likely to get stung, something everybody learned when they were 4 years old. Bee flyways, and this is an important part of the regulation I drafted. I drafted that regulation. The city's initial regulation on beekeeping would have said hardly anybody in the city could keep bees, because it said it had to be 50 feet from your property line, and most homeowners have a 40-foot setback. So bees leave the front of the hive and generally fly upward at a 20-degree angle. Barriers are a very effective means of controlling the bee flyway, and the flyway is where the bees generally tend to go when they leave the hive. Bees do not fly through dense vegetation. They do not fly through small gaps in fences and lattice. They will fly through a chain link fence, and they will fly over barriers that are in front of the hive. A combination of placement of barriers in front of the hive and the direction of the front of the hive is facing can be used to direct the bees to the specific flyway and keep them above your neighbor's head by the time they get to your neighbor's property. The hive can be placed very close to an adjacent property line with no barrier and not have a negative impact so long as the front of the hive is pointed away from that property line. Next. Permissions, and this is one of the things that it's continually come up both with the zoning people and with the council, is this issue of trying to get permission from your neighbors before you get bees. People move in and change. I have 4 adjacent properties to my house. I have, in 22 years, had 12 different neighbors. Whose permission do I have to get when a neighbor moves? How far away should someone have to live before they have influence? My neighbor across the street has more bee activities in his yard than the people that live behind me, because he's got flowers to attract the bees. You may have a neighbor who, and this is the real tricky one, you may have a neighbor who's just a grumpy person. I'm fortunate, I don't have any neighbors like that right now. But just a grumpy person, and just because you say, I want to do something, they say no, just because they don't like you, or they're just grumpy. This is another key too with your permits. Beekeepers get in and out of beekeeping on a regular basis. It's not unusual for a beginning beekeeper to lose all their hives. Usually they start out with 1 and give up for a year or 2, and then they get back into it. So you've issued them a permit, and now they're no longer beekeeping, and then a year later they get a new neighbor in the middle and they want to beekeep again. And now do they still have a permit? What's the deal with that? And then the other question is, what about existing beekeepers if you do a permit or have to get permission? And if it enacted the regulations provided by the mayor a few weeks ago, which is what you're considering tonight, will give the staff the ability to ensure that beekeepers are managing their beehives in a way that is considerate of their neighbors, and go in and request that the person actually take some remedial action. This hive is too close to this fence, you got a neighbor that's grumpy, move it to the other side of your yard, or however you're going to do it. In my opinion, the city does not need new beekeeping regulations. This has been something that every beekeeper I've talked to from Poquoson has said. Assuming that the city does do beekeeping regulations, which it looks like it is, in my opinion, the city should not require a permit for keeping of bees, which the way things are currently drafted would be required. The city should not require permissions, and this is especially true, permissions of neighboring property owners before someone is permitted to keep bees. My sister-in-law is deathly afraid of pit bulls. She was attacked by 2 of them, still has scars on her arm. I can't go, if my neighbor decides they're gonna get pit bulls, I have nothing to say about that. If my neighbor wants to get a kennel and keep beagles, I have nothing to say about that. There are rules in the city that say what you can and can't do on your property. So long as they are following those rules and regulations, it's their property, they have a right to do it. If the city is going to have regulations, the regulations that the mayor had, okay, are what we need. They provide reasonable guidelines for how to keep bees that are considerate of your neighbors, and it has enough clarity that city staff can enforce the regulations. And I wrote down 2 notes here. Yeah, the only issue is and it was a new one compared to everything that's been drafted as far as the draft regulation. They put it underneath something that says you need a permit, and don't think that we should be requiring beekeepers to get permits. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to speak in the public hearing? Okay, seeing none others, I will close the public hearing and ask council for consideration of the ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance by revising Appendix A, Section 1-17, keeping of farm animals.
Somebody taught me this one time, but do we want to do this in first reading? And just be done with it?
And adopt it on the first reading.
I think you,
I'm thinking of the future meeting, that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Yep. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded that we adopt this ordinance, that we adopt it and put it on the books, I guess, 30 days from today, right? That it takes to get in there, and next year. So what it does include is a couple things that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of. One, it does require a permit. That permit is not in some way our desire to regulate this. It is our desire to communicate with you when we're spraying in the neighborhoods, okay, instead of wiping out the hives. I'd like to make sure that, and I believe that the ordinance does do this, that it doesn't charge you a repetitive fee, and I'm not sure that we want a fee at all. But right now, it requires a $15 fee, and that is to make sure that we've got your name on the list. And instead of a list of those that were grandfathered and a list of those that have decided to do beekeeping, we want everybody on the same list. So that way we can make sure that we let our citizens know what the city might do to influence the health of your bees.
When we do that now on a voluntary basis, as I understand, people that have hives call in and put themselves on a list, and if they want to. And I understand to create a hive is about like $300 initially per hive, so I would think most people would want to. And so by doing this, by requiring a permit, we're going to add a lot of staff work for about the same thing that we have now, I think.
So
Do we need to require it, or should it just go ahead and volunteer system like we have now? And we've done that for what, years, I guess?
well, it's a good question, but I mean, the motion made and seconded would include a $15 fee, okay? And it would, and basically, it doesn't make mention of a differentiation. So everybody would be permitted, as I understand it.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Okay, that is correct. So, so that's what is currently out there. So if somebody wants to amend it, but I'm okay with the language as it's currently written, as long as it's a one-time fee just to cover the staff cost. Okay? Council, anything else? If not,
I just had a question for Randy. I know in the farm animal ordinance, it has this section that says, however, the zoning administrator shall establish appropriate setbacks and other stipulations as necessary to preserve the residential nature and tranquility of the neighborhood. And Mr. Powers mentioned, the city coming in and saying, hey, could you move your hive? Does the regulation, the way it's written now, with that little section only applying to farm animals, Does that statement also apply to beekeeping? Since it's in there with the farm animal ordinance?
Yes, ma'am, I believe it does. In almost every instance, whether it's bees or anything, not bees, in all other instances up till now, we get very good cooperation from almost everyone. And right now, it does require an annual permit, and if we have enough problems, we have the option of not renewing a permit for something. But in my whole time here, I think it's gotten to there one time.
Right.
Sherry Coffey does an excellent job in working with people. And again, just to restate, almost every person is pretty flexible in trying to alleviate their neighbors' concerns. Not 100%, but pretty darn close.
Right, that was why I was asking, just for that small percentage where, maybe they're doing everything that the regulation says, but there's still a real issue, and that the city would be able to say, hey, go in and make some suggestions as to what they could do to.
And ultimately, if there was a pervasive issue, even though they were following the ordinance, we still have the option to not renew their permit. Now, that's a pretty difficult decision to make when they're otherwise complying with the ordinance. But we have that option. Like I said, we used it with chickens once, I believe, a long time ago, but we've never used it for anything else.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if not, Judy, please.
Councilman Green,
Aye.
Councilman Hux,
Aye.
Councilman Canella,
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman,
Aye.
and Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, very well, and move on to the next item. The next item is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance pertaining to the maximum size restrictions of covered boat slips. Brief presentation on this one.
Karen will be presenting for staff, sir. She will do an excellent job of being brief. Her PowerPoint presentation is 3 pages, counting the cover.
This will be short.
I would say, council will recall that you asked us to refer this issue to the planning commission maybe 3 months ago. Karen?
Yes. This has been in the works for about 3 months. Thank you. Okay. Yes, this came up about 3 months ago, and the request is basically to get us in line with what VMRC requires as in regards to the size of boat slips. This is our existing definition. Currently, the city defines it as an open-sided structure having a gable, gambrel, or hip-style shingled roof with a minimum pitch of 4 to 12 and measuring no larger than 18 feet in width by 36 feet in length, measured from the eave line. Maximum height of the structure shall be no higher than 15 feet above mean high water. Occupancy or storage above ceiling joists shall be prohibited. There's just a minor change to this. To get it in line with VMRC's requirements, we propose that we strike that 18 by 36 foot measurement and put in 700 square feet in size, unless specifically permitted by VMRC. The 700 square feet in size is 52 square feet larger than what we currently allow. It allows different configurations, so you don't necessarily have to keep it in that type of rectangle. We added the caveat unless specifically permitted by VMRC because they, if someone proposes to do a larger covered boat slip, they would need to go through a public hearing process or at the very least have adjacent property owners notified through VMRC. VMRC does not have jurisdiction over man-made waterways. So if someone came in and wanted to do a larger covered boat slip in a man-made waterway, their only recourse would be to appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance. So either way, adjacent property owners would be notified of anything proposed to be larger than 700 square feet. That's all there is to it. Any questions?
That was really brief. Can you talk longer? Council, do you have any questions of Karen? Okay. If not, I'll open the public hearing. Thank you, Karen. And see if anybody in the public would like to give us some input on this particular ordinance. Okay, seeing nobody in the public here that wants to address this ordinance, I'll close the public hearing and ask council for consideration of the ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance by revising section 1-3 definitions.
Second.
I'm suspend with the second reading.
Okay.
Second that.
Okay, motion made and seconded that we adopt this ordinance and that we suspend the second reading of this ordinance. Questions or comments of council? Okay, seeing none, Judy, please.
Councilwoman Andrews.
Aye.
Councilman Canella.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Hucks.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is new business. First item under new business is an ordinance making additional appropriations for the fiscal year 2018.
Tanya will present on behalf of staff, and Bob's here as well if you have a question about the utility vehicle.
Few housekeeping items. Libraries received some donations, majority from Friends of the Libraries, which we appreciate their efforts. So I just need a couple of housekeeping to appropriate those funds so libraries can go ahead and spend the money.
Okay. Is somebody prepared to make a motion on that ordinance?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt an ordinance making additional appropriations and transfers for fiscal year 2017 and 18.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion made and seconded that we adopt the ordinance appropriating library donations. So any questions or comments? Okay, Judy, please.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Hucks.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Councilman Canella.
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, the next item is an ordinance making an additional appropriation for the purchase of a second utility vehicle.
Well, what we have in front of you is a purchase of a second vehicle. We had in the FY17 budget to purchase one vehicle. Unfortunately, that vehicle did not come in until after the end of the year. So therefore, we're using current year funds. It was allocated for a second vehicle in this year. However, since we've used current year funding, I'm just asking that we go ahead and appropriate fund balance to purchase the second vehicle.
Sewer fund balance.
Sewer fund.
Sorry, my apologies, yes.
Okay.
Just a note, at the end of last year, their sewer fund had changed in net position of positive of $586,000. So there is money available in fund balance to do so.
Okay. Is there a motion that we do this ordinance?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt an ordinance making additional appropriations and transfers for fiscal year 2017 and 18 for an additional utility truck.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. We approve this ordinance and allow these, the fund balance from Public Works, not Public Works. Utility funds to pay for this truck. So questions or comments? Judy, please.
Councilman Canella.
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews.
Aye.
Councilman Green.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman.
Aye.
Councilman Hucks.
Aye.
And Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, very well. And we are at comments of the city manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I really only have one thing, and it sort of dovetails on the last action you took. Last week, had an opportunity to go and tour the recent addition at the utility building, look at the new vacuum truck that we'd recently received, and got a chance with some staff to sort of turn and look back at the whole campus we have down there, the new administrative buildings, which we got after the fire, the larger storage building, which you may recall very well, that you could rattle literally the support beams and see through the roof when I got here. And just despite the difficult times we found ourselves in financially, the significant improvements that you all have helped make in the physical plant and the equipment is appreciated and is obvious out there. And if you get a chance to go out, we would love to walk you around and show you some of these things. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Directives of council, we'll start with you, Jana.
Just wanted to say, the mayor mentioned it earlier, we have several people retiring from the city, and I'm looking at this list in front of me, and when you add up the years, that's a lot of years and a lot of experience that we're going to lose. And so I just wanted to say, wish all of them well in their retirement, and hope they really enjoy that, and how much we're going to miss working. We've got Debbie here and Judy who are on the list, and appreciate all your years of service. I'm really sad that I just got here and you guys are all leaving, but it's been great to work with you, and just wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday, and stay safe and drive safe when you're out there on the roads.
Okay, very well. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Just want to say to all the city departments that y'all just do a outstanding job. I get stopped nearly everywhere I go, church, civic organizations, or even, you know, at Farm Fresh, and people tell me that some particular department did something good for them. And I get that so much more frequently than I ever get any kind of complaint. So just want to say great job to all the city departments, and secondly, just wish everybody a very Merry Christmas.
Councilman Hux.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no comment tonight.
Okay, Councilman Green.
Mr. Mayor, just want to remind everybody that because the fourth Tuesday falls after Christmas, we've moved the food bank distribution to a week from this Tuesday. It'll be on the 19th from 10 to 1 at the old City Hall, and Kirkwood Presbyterian Church is hosting it this time. So please be aware that the date is different. It is the third, not the fourth Tuesday. And wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Okay, very well. Councilman Cannella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to piggyback on what some other members of council have said, you know, I look at this list of this year's retirees, and I've had the honor and privilege, quite frankly, to grow up around quite a few people on this list. One in particular, Miss Judy. You know, from a young child to now, when I come to City Hall, I always am sure to go see Miss Judy in her office, and that's something I'll certainly miss. And just the overwhelming amount of knowledge and love and passion she has for the city is something that simply can't be replaced, and I know it's something that everyone up here will miss. I think we found a suitable replacement, but he's got some big shoes to fill. But I think he'll do a good job in doing that. But we will certainly miss you.
Okay, always difficult, and I would say that I've grown up with most of this staff as well, although that growing up was all my time in council since 96, I think. What I would tell you is that I'm going to read these names because, and I really want the people at home to recognize where they've run into them and all the things that they've helped them with. Earlier in the year, Mr. Jim Beach retired. Okay, as many of us remember, Jim Beach was running a construction company that built the city hall that we're sitting in today, and then he took the time to maintain it with us as it aged and all those things. But the biggest thing I can remember about Jim himself was the way he dealt with our citizens out there in a kind and caring way. Marty Staten, 22 years, the children's librarian, right, for many, many years here in our city. I will tell you that it's hard for me to walk in that office and not think of where's Miss Marty. Vicki Diggs left us earlier in this year and after 29 years of service, and we miss her every day. I will tell you that I looked forward to calling the city manager just to get Vicki's turn on events and what was really going on in the city that I should know about. Dale Simmons retired from our police department after 31 and a half years. Okay, as our detective, he retired earlier in the year, and we got to enjoy some of the humorous stories about when he first came to the Poquoson Police Department and his way through. Nathan Dryden, in our fire department, serving for 33 years. What an honor and what a solid individual he was in every day of his service. Debbie Vest, who's sitting in our audience this evening, after 36 years of trying to go through all of the zoning ordinances and trying to educate council from all of those years of experience on what it is that we were making changes to, and leading a planning commission for multiple years. Her service will be indelibly over the city for the next 20 years as we continue to look at those ordinances that she's had such a big part of. And finally, last but not least, the one with the most years of service, and the one that I recall is Judy Wiggins after 37 years. First time I remember meeting Judy, I was just thinking about running for council, and I'd come to council meetings and I'd hear, "Judy, call the roll." She has probably served with more mayors, and I am indelibly marked by all of the encouragement, the way to run the city, and the way to treat our citizens that she has had. I could go through the list of accolades for years, but I think it suffices to say that Judy was somebody that every citizen of Poquoson, when they came into the city manager's office, knew that there was somebody there that was going to help them. And I don't think there's a higher calling in public service. And I would think that every member of this council felt the same way when they came in. So we look forward to celebrating these folks in the coming week or so in 2017. But the challenge simply is to the future employees of the city of Poquoson, those that are taking these positions on, many of them sitting in our chamber here this evening, learning the ropes from them and making this a seamless transition. It's going to be difficult. I will tell you, you don't lose 200 years of knowledge and replace it in the first year. But what I would say is that many of these people that are retiring have actually had a hand in either picking or training their replacements. And to that, and Randy and I talked about this earlier, actually towards the end of 2016 before the election, knowing that the city of Poquoson was going to make a substantive change in personnel, I will tell each and every one of you that we're going to be just as good tomorrow as we are today, but we're going to miss the people that have brought us here, okay? And I'm never going to forget many of the ones that are on this list in my years of service here. So just wanted to say that this is the last meeting for most of them, if not, well, for all of them. This is the last time the council will meet with them. I'm going to pass the hammer down there to Judy so she can dismiss the meeting. But she's going to do that after we get back from a closed session. Okay? So we are going to have a closed session, but I'm going to offer Judy, since people are at home, if you would like to say anything, you're welcome to do that.
I would like to. I didn't think I'd have the courage to sit here my last night, listen to your comments, but so I want to say something. I want to thank Mr. John Rowe, the first city manager I ever worked with, who called me at home and offered me this position in 1980. I came and I knew nothing about council or how to run a council meeting, and he was very strict. He was a workaholic, and he worked me to death. But I will tell you, I loved every minute of working after hours to get these agendas out. I learned so much, and like you said, I've been through many council mayors, many council members. I have loved every 37 years of being here. I've loved the employees I've worked with, the girls that were by my side and brought me this far. It's been a pleasure to have served you. I will never forget you. I will never forget how kind you've all been to me, to staff, to the citizens of Poquoson. I do have a love to help citizens of Poquoson, and that love will never go away. And so a knock on my door or call at my house, I'm there and I'm ready to help. And I'm ready to help the city in any way I can afterwards. I say a big thank you to all of you. It's been my pleasure.
All right, so I'm not going to allow Judy to beat me with that hammer. But we do need to move to a closed session real quick, and then if I could get a motion to do so, I would appreciate it.
Mayor, I move that we be in closed session pursuant to section 2.2, 3711A3 of the Code of Virginia, 1950, as amended, to continue discussion on the disposition of publicly held real properties, i.e. Mill Road and Cedar Road.
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded that we move to closed session. Judy, please.
Councilwoman Andrews,
Aye.
Councilman Canella,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Freeman,
Aye.
Councilman Hux,
Aye.
Councilman Green,
Aye.
and Mayor Hunt.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, very well, and we are in closed session.